The sun was leaning low when Elias Ward guided his horse into the narrow canyon, the light turning the ridges copper and gold. It had been a long day of riding fence lines and searching for the 3 calves that had gone missing from his ranch. The summer heat had been relentless that season, drying streams and thinning pastures, and every animal mattered. His horse's hooves stirred soft clouds of red dust that rose and faded like ghosts behind him. The canyon was quiet in a way that didn't feel empty, more as if it were listening. Elias slowed his mare. He could hear the hush of the wind sliding along the stone and the rustle of the brittle brush. Then beneath it, faint but clear, singing. It was not English. The melody rose and fell like waves rolling over sand, gentle and ancient. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the canyon walls. Elias felt the hairs on the back of his neck lift. He dismounted, tying his horse to a mesquite branch, and followed the voice deeper into the rocks. As he rounded a bend, he saw her. She stood on a flat stretch of earth near a cluster of desert lilies that bloomed pale and ghostly among the dust. Her long black hair moved with the wind like flowing water. Her dress was decorated with beadwork, but not like the pieces sold in town. This had history stitched into every thread. She wasn't singing anymore. Instead, she was gathering flowers with calm, slow hands. Elias froze, unsure whether to speak or retreat. She noticed him the way a deer does, softly, without surprise, as though she had known he would appear. Her dark eyes met his with a steady, unguarded look. Not fear, not curiosity. Something quieter, recognition almost. "You're far from your settlement," she said in accented English, her voice smooth as the canyon wind. Elias cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how loud his boots sounded on the stone. "I'm just looking for cattle," he replied. "Didn't mean to wander onto your land." "There is no land that belongs only to one," she said simply. She returned her gaze to the flowers, selecting another one with care, as if each bloom had a story. Elias felt oddly compelled to speak. "It's quiet out here," he said. "Quiet lets the heart speak," she answered. He did not know what to say to that. No one in town talked like that, certainly not the ranch hands who swore at the sun and the dust. The woman's calm unsettled him more than any threat would have. It felt as if she was not bothered by his presence at all. She finished gathering her small bundle of flowers, then stepped closer. Not too close to be bold, but close enough that he could smell the faint scent of sage and wild blooming things clinging to her clothing. She selected one flower from her bundle, a pale desert lily, petals soft and white like moonlight. "This is for you," she said. Elias blinked. "For me?" She nodded. The wind whispered through the canyon again, swirling around them as if it carried meaning. Elias hesitated only a moment. She was offering it so sincerely, and it felt wrong to refuse the gift of someone who had looked at him so openly, so unafraid. He reached out and took the flower from her hand. The moment his skin brushed hers, something changed. The air seemed to tighten, the canyon suddenly holding its breath. A small gust of wind lifted dust around their feet, circling them like a ring. Her expression shifted. Not shocked, not pleased. Something more solemn, like someone witnessing the beginning of something they cannot stop. Elias felt a strange warmth travel from his fingertips up his arm and into his chest. Not painful, just present, as though something unseen had touched him from the inside. "What's your name?" he asked quietly, almost afraid to break the moment. She looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than she appeared. "Nayeli." Elias opened his mouth to tell her his own name, but she spoke first. "I know who you are." His breath caught. The wind died. The canyon fell silent again. Nayeli gave him a small, soft smile, one that held no triumph, only inevitability. "Go back to your home now," she said gently, "and remember the flower." Elias found his voice only after she had already begun to walk away, disappearing into the canyon's warm light as though she had never been there at all. He stood alone, the flower trembling in his hand, the meaning of it still hidden, but waiting. Elias rode back toward the settlement with the flower tucked carefully inside his shirt, close to his chest where the petals wouldn't bruise. He didn't understand why he felt the need to protect it. It was just a desert lily, a wildflower among thousands. Yet every time he thought of tossing it away, something inside him tightened, like a rope pulling from deep within. The sky dimmed to violet as he reached the outskirts of the ranch town. Lanterns flickered to life on porch rails, and smoke from evening cook fires curled lazily above the rooftops. Elias guided his horse toward the stable, where old Tom Whitaker, the man who had worked the Ward ranch since before Elias was born, looked up from brushing a bay mare. "You're back late," Tom said, squinting under the brim of his hat. "Find the calves?" "No," Elias replied. He swung down from the saddle, but his mind was still back in the canyon, still hearing the faint echo of singing. He felt different. He couldn't say how. Tom's eyes narrowed, studying him the way a man studies a horse to see if it's been spooked. "You all right, boy?" Elias hesitated. The flower seemed to pulse warmly, though he knew that was impossible. "I ran into someone," Elias finally said. "An Apache girl. She was picking flowers by the ridge." Silence snapped over the stable like a tightened snaffle strap. Tom slowly set down the brush. "What did she say?" he asked, voice lower, heavier. Elias shrugged. "She gave me a flower." He reached into his shirt and produced the pale lily untouched by dust or heat. Tom's face drained of color. "Lord above," he whispered, then made the sign of the cross, something Elias had never once seen him do in 20 years. "You took it? You took the flower?" Elias frowned. "It's just a flower." But Tom shook his head sharply, stepping back like the thing in Elias's hand was a rattlesnake. "Boy, you don't know what you've done." Before Elias could ask more, a voice called from the path. It was Mrs. Avery, the general store owner's wife, carrying a basket of laundry. Her gaze landed on the flower. The basket slipped from her hands, cloth spilling across the dirt. "No," she murmured. "Not again." Again. The word hit harder than wind. Elias felt something cold move through him. "What does that mean? What are you all talking about?" Mrs. Avery's voice trembled. "My brother Jacob, years ago, he found an Apache woman in the hills. She gave him a white desert lily. He kept it too, and for a time he was changed, happier, full of dreams that came from nowhere." Her voice cracked. "But then the night came when she called him, and he left, no horse, no water, no coat. Walked straight into the desert like a sleepwalker." Tears welled in her eyes. "We never found him. Not even bones." Elias stared at her. "You think I'm going to vanish into the desert because of a flower?" Tom stepped closer now, not fearful but determined. "It ain't the flower," he said quietly. "It's the bond. Apache women don't give flowers like greeting cards. They give them to claim a spirit, to choose a partner sometimes across lifetimes." Elias laughed, but the sound was hollow. "This is superstition." Tom didn't laugh back. "You feel her already, don't you?" he said. "Not in your head, in your heart." "You feel her when you breathe." Elias stopped. He did feel something, a warmth that wasn't his, a presence faint but steady, like someone standing just behind him where he could not turn to look. He swallowed. "I don't even know her," he whispered. Mrs. Avery wiped her eyes. "She knows you." The evening bell rang from the church at the end of Main Street, a deep, low tone that rolled through the dusk. Townsfolk drifted out of buildings, heading to supper, laughter and chatter echoing briefly before fading again. But around Elias, the world felt unnaturally still. Tom put a heavy, weathered hand on his shoulder. "You need to go speak to the tribal elder," he said. "Before the bond sets deep. Before it can't be undone." Elias stared down at the flower. The petals gleamed like silver in the low light, pure, fragile, eternal. He didn't know whether to feel fear or wonder, because beneath the confusion, beneath the warnings and the whispering dread, there was something else too. A pull, a recognition, as though some part of him had been waiting for that flower all his life. Night settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, though Elias did not sleep. He lay in his bed, boots still on, hat tossed aside, the white desert lily resting on the small wooden table beside him. Outside, the cicadas buzzed in the warm dark, the wind murmured over the plains, and the house creaked in familiar ways. But everything felt different, as if every sound had a heartbeat, as if every shadow watched. He shut his eyes, willing sleep to claim him, but it came only in broken pieces, light drifting and strange. And in those fragments he saw her, Nayeli. She wasn't doing anything extraordinary, only standing somewhere in moonlight, her hair moving in the wind, her gaze turned toward something distant. But it was the feeling that accompanied the vision that shook him, a sense of not being alone, of sharing his mind with another presence soft and quiet, like a whispering echo. He woke with a start, breath shallow. The room smelled faintly of wildflowers. He sat up fast. The flower still lay on the table, but its petals looked fresher now, as though it had never been plucked from its stem. Elias touched it. A faint warmth pulsed through it, as if the flower remembered sunlight. He tried to shake it off, tried to tell himself it was exhaustion, superstition, nonsense. He had worked too long in the heat, that was all. People believed all sorts of foolish things. But when he went about his chores, the strangeness followed. As he carried water to the troughs, a deep sadness welled in his chest, sudden and unexplained, so strong it made his hands shake. He stopped, gripping the bucket so tightly his knuckles whitened. The sadness didn't belong to him. It felt like it came from somewhere else. From her, from Nayeli. He pressed his palm to his chest, trying to steady his breath. Moments later, the emotion faded as quickly as it had arrived, leaving him hollow but clearer. A stray memory flickered through his mind, not his own memory, he knew that instantly. A child's laughter, a woven cradleboard, a man with black paint on his cheeks speaking to a fire. He didn't know the faces, but somehow deep in his bones he recognized them. It was then he whispered aloud, "Nayeli." There was no answer, not in words, only a quiet warmth spreading beneath his ribs. Later that morning, he saddled his horse to ride into town. The sky was wide and endless above him, hawks circling in slow arcs. As he guided the horse toward the settlement, the scent of desert lilies followed him, sweet and soft, impossible in the dry heat. Every footstep of the mare felt echoed inside him, almost like someone else was walking beside him unseen. And then, as he approached the church at the center of town, the world shifted for a moment, not visibly, but in him. A feeling, a certainty. Nayeli was awake. Somewhere, not far, she had just opened her eyes. He felt it. Not imagined it, felt it. The warmth in his chest brightened, gentled. His breath steadied. He didn't know how to explain what was happening to him. He didn't know who he could tell. The townsfolk already feared what they did not understand. If he admitted that the woman was in his mind, they would think him bewitched or worse. Yet the bond did not frighten him the way it should have. Instead, it felt like a door opening, a door to something familiar, something he had lost long ago, before this life perhaps, though thinking such a thing felt dangerous. As he reached the main street, he passed a group of children playing with sticks. One of the younger boys, maybe 5, stopped mid-laugh and stared up at Elias with wide eyes too knowing for his age. The child whispered, "She chose you." Elias froze. Before he could speak, the boy's mother rushed forward, grabbing the child by the shoulders. "Don't look at him," she hissed. She pulled the boy away, shielding him with her body as though Elias were a storm rolling in. Elias watched them retreat, confusion and dread twining together in his gut. The people of the town weren't simply afraid. They expected this. They had seen this before. He rode away slowly, the weight of every stare on his back, and through it all the bond pulsed steady inside him, Nayeli's heartbeat and his. 2 drums once distant, now slowly falling into rhythm. He didn't know yet whether this connection was blessing or curse. But he knew one truth with absolute certainty. He was no longer walking his life alone. And whatever awaited him, it had already begun. The days that followed were slow and heavy, as though time itself had thickened. Elias tried to keep life moving as usual, repairing fences, driving cattle, tending to the land. But something in the ranch had changed. He could feel it in the soil, in the animals, in the air. The first sign was small. One morning, Elias found the cattle clustered near the far fence line, refusing to graze in the pasture's center. The grass there was just as dry and stubborn as anywhere else, but for some reason they avoided it, hooves stamping anxiously if he tried to lead them toward it. Animals sensed things humans could not. Elias crouched and pressed his palm to the ground. The earth felt wrong. Not dead, not sick, but like it was waiting, as though it too held its breath. Then came the water. The main watering trough, filled just the day before, had dropped to nearly half its level overnight. There had been no heat wave, no leak, no thirsty herd crowding around. The water simply vanished. The stream that fed the back edge of the ranch slowed to a thin trickle, though it had always run strong despite the season. Old Tom squinted at the fading stream and muttered, "The land's reacting." Elias didn't need to ask what he meant. He already knew. The flower sat on Elias's bedside table each night, fresh no matter how many days passed. It never wilted. never browned. He dared not try to remove it anymore, not after the first attempt when he had set it outside on the porch step. The next morning it had been back inside, placed precisely where it had been, petals unmarked as if time had not touched it. And with each passing day the bond grew stronger. Sometimes as Elias worked he felt emotions that were not his own, a quiet sorrow soft and steady. A warm flicker of hope, a fierce protective longing. Nayeli was there, not in body, not in voice, but in presence. At night he dreamed of her. Not visions like before, these were vivid, breathing dreams. He saw the shape of her world, a clearing of pine trees under starlight, a fire burning low, shadows moving in a quiet circle. He heard the soft murmur of her people speaking in a language older than memory. He smelled cedar smoke and river water, and sometimes he saw her eyes watching him through the flames. When he woke, he carried her emotions still, like embers smoldering under ash. Yet the ranch did not share in this quiet connection. It suffered. Calves that had been healthy began refusing to nurse. Horses rolled their eyes white when Elias approached, then calmed only after he spoke Nayeli's name under his breath, though he did not understand why he did so. Chickens stopped laying. Grass thinned. Even the wind felt harsher. Rumors spread in town. He's marked. The girl has him. It'll end the same way it always does. When Elias walked through the settlement, people glanced away, some with pity, some with cold fear. No one dared speak to him directly, but he heard the whispers following behind him like dust trailing a wagon. Elias tried to ignore them, but one evening, he found Tom leaning against the corral fence, his weathered face carved deep with worry. "Boy," Tom said, voice slow, heavy, "you need to listen to me now." Elias didn't speak. He waited. Tom took off his hat, running a shaking hand through thinning gray hair. "The land's tied to you. Has been since you took over your father's ranch. A rancher's heart feeds his soil. Always has. You bind your spirit to anything else." He gestured vaguely toward the horizon, toward the canyon. "The land follows." Elias gripped the fence, feeling splinters dig into his skin. "This is not a curse," he said softly. "It doesn't feel like one." Tom looked at him then, not angry, not afraid, just sad. It never does at the start. The wind blew across the pasture, bending the grass in long, slow waves. Elias felt something then, a flutter in his chest, warm and urgent. Nayeli, she was feeling something. Something sharp, something like loss. His breath caught. He did not know how he knew, but he knew. She was calling. Not with words, not yet, but soon. And as night crept across the plains, Elias realized the truth buried beneath every whispered warning. The bond was not waiting to consume him. It was already in motion. And the ranch? The cattle? The land he had grown from childhood to love? They were no longer only his. They were part of the price. For 3 days, the ranch seemed to breathe with a slow, uneasy heartbeat. Elias tried to continue as though nothing had changed, but every moment reminded him that everything had. The cattle still huddled close to fences. The grass thinned in new patches, and the stream that once ran steady now trickled like old bones creaking. Even the wind felt restless, tugging at his clothes, whispering against the windows of the house at night. But worst of all was the pull, a quiet, constant thread tightening inside his chest. Sometimes it felt like yearning, gentle and warm. Sometimes it felt like urgency, sharp and insistent. He felt her, not in words, not in voice, but in a presence that settled behind his ribs, soft, patient, waiting. On the 4th morning, Elias couldn't carry the weight of the unknown any longer. He saddled his horse before the sun had fully risen, the sky still pale and silvered, and rode toward the canyon. Old Tom called after him from the porch, his voice gravelly with warning. "Elias, you already know where this road leads." Elias didn't stop, didn't answer, couldn't. The bond pulled him forward. The canyon was quiet as he rode in, only the soft scrape of hooves over stone. The desert lilies still bloomed in their pale clusters, untouched by drought or heat. Their white petals glowed faintly, catching the morning light like frost, and there she was. Nayeli, as though she had always been waiting. She sat on a flat stone, legs folded beneath her, her long dark hair braided loosely over one shoulder. The wind lifted strands of it in slow waves like water stirred by fingertips. She didn't look surprised to see him, only relieved. Elias dismounted slowly. He felt like he was stepping into a place where time did not behave properly. "You knew I'd come," he said softly. Nayeli nodded. "Your heart remembered the path." Her voice had the same quiet strength it had the first day, a sound that didn't need to rise to be heard. Elias approached, each step measured as though the earth itself listened. "Things are happening," he said. "On my land, to me. I need to understand." Nayeli looked up at him fully then, and Elias felt that same shift in the air, the world narrowing to the space between them. "You accepted the flower," she said. "As a gift. A gift is a choice," she replied gently, "and a choice ties two lives together." Elias's breath tightened. "I didn't," he stopped. He had no words for what he felt, no way to explain that some part of him had known something was happening, even before he understood it. She placed a hand over her own heart. "My people call it Nawani," she said. "The returning, when two souls that have known one another before find each other again." Elias stared at her, wind pressing the moment into stillness. "You're saying this happened before? That we knew each other?" "In another life?" Nayeli did not smile, did not dramatize. She simply nodded once with the calm certainty of someone speaking a truth older than language. "You were a wanderer," she said softly. "I was a healer. You carried a wound no one could see, and you stayed until you were no longer lost." A strange ache rose in Elias's chest, not memory but familiarity, like a song he couldn't name but somehow knew. "With the flower I called you again," she continued. "But calling always has a price." "The ranch," Elias whispered. "My land, my cattle." "Yes," she said, sadness flickering across her eyes. "The land feels your loyalty shift. It knows your spirit is no longer bound only to this place." Elias exhaled slowly, as though the truth itself changed the air in his lungs. "I didn't mean to choose," he said. "You did not choose with your mind," Nayeli replied. "You chose with your soul." Silence settled between them, not empty but heavy with meaning. Elias looked into her eyes and saw no manipulation, no desire to own or trap him, only recognition, a quiet longing, and beneath it something sacred, connection. He felt her pulse inside his chest, soft, steady, reaching toward him. And he realized something simple, terrifying, and undeniable. He wanted her, not because of the bond, not because of destiny, but because when she looked at him, truly looked, he felt seen. The way no one else ever had. Elias took a slow step closer, the canyon wind weaving around them like a living thing. "Then tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me what comes next." Nayeli's expression did not waver. Now she said, "You meet my family, not as a visitor, but as the man her spirit had chosen." The journey to Nayeli's village began at dusk. The sunset spilled gold and rose across the sky, as though the day itself were burning into memory. Elias rode beside Nayeli on horseback, though it felt less like travel and more like being guided, drawn along a path his heart already knew, even if his mind did not. They crossed rocky ridges and sagebrush plains where the wind moved in long, sweeping breaths. In the silence between them, Elias felt the bond more clearly than ever, a soft pulse under his ribs, warm and sure. He didn't need to speak to know Nayeli sensed his thoughts, and she didn't need to speak for him to feel her calm. When they reached the pine grove, evening shadows had deepened. The air grew cooler, scented with resin and river water. Elias heard voices drifting on the wind, low, melodic, steady as drums. Nayeli slowed her horse. "My people have seen the flower," she said softly. "They know you are coming." Her words sent something like nerves through Elias's chest, sharp, fluttering, real. He was not afraid of these people, but he feared what he represented to them. The village rested in a clearing among tall pines. Firelight glowed from the center where families sat in quiet conversation, children weaving grass cords, elders sharpening tools that looked more ceremonial than practical. No one shouted. No one rushed. Every movement felt intentional, as if time here was not broken down into hours but moments. When Elias and Nayeli entered, the singing stopped, not abruptly, not in suspicion, but in acknowledgement. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, but not one held fear. Instead, they watched him with the kind of stillness that sees past skin and into the spirit. A tall man stepped forward. He wore a deerskin mantle painted with shapes that seemed to represent mountains and rivers. His hair, braided with raven feathers, fell to his chest. His face was lined, not with age, but with the weight of knowledge. This was the elder. Nayeli dismounted and bowed her head slightly, not submissive, but respectful. Elias followed suit, though uncertain. The elder spoke first. "You have taken the flower of Nayeli," he said. His voice was deep, slow, textured like the earth itself. "Do you understand what that means?" Elias swallowed. "I understand. That it binds us." "It binds more than two hearts," the elder replied. "It binds past to present, spirit to spirit, land to journey." Elias nodded once, though he sensed the elder did not ask for acknowledgement, only truth. A young woman approached with a wooden bowl, offering it to Elias. The scent of sage rose from the steam. He drank because the moment asked for acceptance, not hesitation. Warmth traveled through him, gentle, steadying. The elder continued, "We are not here to test you. The bond has already chosen. We are here to see whether your spirit remembers us as hers remembers you." Nayeli looked at Elias then, not with pressure but with quiet encouragement. So Elias closed his eyes. The fire crackled nearby. The wind moved through the pines in long, whispering waves, and in the warmth spreading through his body he felt something shift. A memory, though not a memory, rose inside him. A clearing like this one. A night like this one. A woman, Nayeli, but not as she was now, dressed in different beads, a different expression, yet the same eyes. He was kneeling beside her, placing river stones in a circle. He didn't see the rest, not clearly, but he felt the emotion. Belonging. And devotion. He opened his eyes. The elder watched him, not surprised, but satisfied. "You carry recognition," the elder said, "even if only in echoes." The villagers relaxed, returning to their work, their songs, their fires. The moment of judgment, if that's what it had been, was past. Nayeli sat beside Elias near the fire. The flame's glow painted her skin in warm copper tones. She looked at him with a gentleness that held both pride and sorrow. "You remember?" she whispered. "I don't understand it," Elias said, voice low, "but I feel it." "That is enough," she replied. But as the fire crackled and voices lifted again in song, Elias felt something else beneath the warmth. A thread of fear. Not his, not Nayeli's, but the village's, because they had welcomed him, yes. But they knew the cost of the bond better than he did. Somewhere in the trees beyond the firelight something moved, watching, waiting. Something that remembered him too, but not with love. With claim. The night air was cold enough to make breath visible, yet the flames of the ceremonial fire cast a warm amber glow across the clearing. The Apache village, usually filled with movement, song, and the playful laughter of children, was subdued tonight. A stillness hovered, one that was not born of fear but of reverence. Something sacred was about to occur, and everyone present understood that moments like this were rare, spoken of only in whispered stories or sung to newborns by their grandmothers. Laredo stood near the center of the gathering, dressed now in garments offered to him by Gray Fox's family. They were simple yet ceremonial. A woven vest dyed the color of sun-baked earth and a feather braided into his hair. He looked both out of place and strangely at home, like a man standing on the threshold of one life and stepping into another. His hands were clasped before him, fingers woven tight not from fear but from the heavy weight of the unknown. Gray Fox, meanwhile, sat near the fire, surrounded by the women of her family who prepared her. They brushed her hair, dark and shining under the fire's glow, and tied it with leather cords decorated in small bone beads. Her dress, though modest, was adorned with patterns of her clan, symbols of hawk and river and the eternal path. But her face was the thing that drew the most attention. Not because it had been painted with ceremonial colors, rich red across her cheeks, white dust tracing the curve of her jaw, but because she looked both powerful and vulnerable at once. She was ready, though readiness did not mean certainty. Laredo's heart pounded when she finally rose and approached him. The entire village watched. No one spoke. No drum sounded. No priest or elder acted as guide. This was personal. This was ancient. This was theirs. Gray Fox stopped in front of Laredo, her eyes lifting to meet his. For a moment the world faded. No chief, no villagers, no fate. Just her, just him. "You came," Gray Fox said softly. Laredo nodded. "I came." There was no declaration of love, no vow of loyalty. This was not marriage. This was binding, the joining of souls through acceptance of the flower, a tradition that most outside the Apache world never knew. And if they did, they rarely understood. The flower Gray Fox had given him, delicate, pale, sweetly fragrant, was not merely a token of affection. It was a symbol that her spirit had chosen him. Accepting it meant accepting not just her but her ancestors, her destiny, her heart, and the price for accepting was eternity in one form or another. Whether that meant eternal devotion, eternal longing, eternal suffering, or eternal blessing, depended on how both hearts walked forward. Gray Fox produced another flower now, nearly identical to the one he had first accepted. But instead of simply offering it, she held it between them. The firelight reflected in her eyes. "If I place this flower into your palm," she said, voice steady though her breath quivered, "you will walk my path, my joys, my burdens, my dreams, my memories. You will no longer walk as one but as two bound in spirit." Laredo swallowed. He remembered old words from soldiers in the forts, rumors spoken half-mockingly. Never take a gift from an Apache woman unless you're prepared to belong to her. At the time, it was said like a joke. Now, he knew the weight was real. "And if you wish to walk away," Gray Fox added carefully, "do so now. No shame, no anger, no sorrow. We will let the wind carry the memory away." He could walk away. He could return to his life, his ranch, his cattle, his freedom. Yet when he looked into her eyes, he did not see captivity. He saw a home he never knew he needed. Slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand. Her breath hitched, not in relief, but in awe. This moment would echo through both of them forever. Gray Fox placed the flower gently in his palm. The petals glowed in the firelight, but the warmth that bloomed across his skin was not from the flame. It was from her. Then the village breathed again. A drumbeat sounded, one, then another, a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat shared by the earth and sky. Gray Fox reached up, her fingertips brushing his cheek. Not a lover's touch, a soul's touch, a recognition. "You are mine," she whispered. "And you are mine," he answered. Not because tradition demanded it, but because his heart did. The ceremony did not bind their bodies. It bound their destinies. And destinies are not always gentle, not always kind, but always true. The village woke slowly the next morning, but something in the air had changed. Not a storm nor danger. Something quieter, more intimate, like a shift beneath the soil or inside the bones of the earth. Word had spread, the binding was done. The drummers had played long into the night, and some said they could feel the drums in their dreams beating inside their chests like a second heart, not their own. Laredo woke in the guest lodge, lying on a woven mat, the ceiling made of timber and reed above him. But it wasn't the unfamiliar room that startled him. It was the feeling that he was not alone inside his own mind. A whisper. Not a voice, not words, but something like the echo of someone breathing beside him from within. He sat upright, gripping his chest. The world didn't look different. But he was different. He didn't have time to try to understand it before the lodge flap rustled softly. Gray Fox entered, carrying a clay bowl of morning tea. Her steps were quiet, graceful, like she had crossed the doorway without ever touching the ground. She set the tea down beside him and sat across from him, folding her legs beneath her. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. For the first time, Laredo felt what she felt. Not fully, not clearly, just a faint impression. Her calmness, her awareness of him, the way her mind brushed against his like fingertips grazing skin. She finally spoke. "It begins," he exhaled shakily. "I feel you." "Yes," she said, head bowing once. "That is the bond. It does not bind our thoughts, only our hearts." Her eyes lifted to his, and there was something deeper there now. Not possession, not pride, recognition. "You may feel my joy," she explained carefully, "but also my sorrow, my strength, my fear." "And you'll feel mine?" he asked. "I already do." Laredo's throat tightened. It was overwhelming but not frightening. More like discovering a door inside your chest had been opened, and there was a breeze now flowing between two worlds. But the ceremony was not the price. The price came after. The village had gathered outside. The chief waited for them, surrounded by elders and warriors, all wearing expressions that were neither celebration nor condemnation, just solemn acceptance. When Laredo and Gray Fox stepped into the open air, the elders approached. There were 5 of them, each with weathered faces and eyes that seemed to hold entire lifetimes. The eldest, a woman with silver braids wrapped in red ribbons, spoke. "You have accepted the flower. You have accepted her spirit. Now you must accept the path." Laredo nodded slowly. He had known this was coming. But knowing and understanding are never the same. Gray Fox stood beside him, her posture straight, though Laredo could feel the tension tightening in her heartbeat, now echoing faintly inside him. The elder woman continued, "There is a place beyond the ridge in the canyon where the earth remembers the oldest stories. A place where the ancestors walk in the wind. You must go there together. You must stand before the stone of names, and you must speak who you are now, not as two people, but as one joined soul." Gray Fox lowered her gaze. Laredo asked quietly, "And if we don't?" The elder's eyes softened with sadness. "Then the bond will twist. Instead of shared spirit, there will be shared loss. You will feel her pain and she yours with no balance. Two souls tangled, unable to walk apart or together." Laredo felt that whisper again inside his chest, this time sharper. Fear. Not his. Gray Fox's. He turned to her. "We'll go." She nodded once, though her breathing trembled. Because there was one more truth, one never spoken aloud in English but understood by every Apache child. The path always demands something in return. Not money, not blood, but a memory, a piece of self. Something one can never reclaim. As they left the village, walking toward the ridges painted in orange sunlight, Laredo finally asked, "What did you lose when you first gave the flower?" Gray Fox walked in silence for several moments. The canyon wind lifted her hair, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Then she looked at him, not with mystery, not with mysticism, but with raw human pain. "My future," she whispered. Laredo's steps faltered. She continued, "When I chose you, I chose a path different from the one the spirits laid for me. I gave away the future I might have had, in return for the chance of us." He stared at her, stunned. Then the price was not just for him. This bond had already cost her everything, and now, the rest of the price was coming for him. The journey to the stone took most of the day. Gray Fox led the way through stretches of red earth and soft desert scrub, her steps steady even as silence settled between them. Laredo didn't speak, but he didn't need to. Even without words, he felt her thoughts, the quiet stirring of memory, the ache of things unspoken. The bond pulsed gently between them like a second heartbeat, fragile and new. The land changed as they walked. The cactus fields gave way to rock formations shaped by centuries of wind. The air grew cooler. The sky stretched wide and endless overhead. Every so often a hawk would circle far above, its cry echoing across the canyon. The sounds felt ancient, like the world itself was watching. Finally, they reached the ridge. Below it, nestled in a valley carved by time, stood a massive stone, a towering monolith rising from the ground like the spine of the earth itself. Its surface was etched with symbols, petroglyphs spiraling upward in thousands of lines. They were names, names of ancestors, names of lovers bound by spirit, names of those who had lived and died for love, for honor, for grief. Gray Fox stopped at the ridge's edge, her expression shifting. Laredo felt the shift too. He felt the weight of the place, felt the gravity of what they were about to do. "This is where the bond is made eternal," she whispered. They descended the slope slowly, carefully. When they reached the base of the stone, the air felt still, as if even the wind dared not speak here. Gray Fox placed her palm against the stone. Laredo did the same beside her. The stone was warm. Warm like blood. Her voice was soft, but the words were ancient, far older than either of them. "I give my name to the wind and my spirit to the joining. We are not one life, but two paths twisted like rivers under the same sky." Laredo didn't understand the language she spoke in, but he felt every syllable vibrate through his chest. Something stirred inside him, something old, something waiting. When she finished, she turned to him. "It is your turn," she said. "But I don't know the words." She stepped closer. "You do. They will rise when you speak." He didn't believe that until he opened his mouth. The words came, not in English, not learned, but remembered, as though they had been waiting inside him all along. His voice trembled. "I choose the path that binds, not by command, not by fate, but by the knowing of the heart." Gray Fox's breath caught, not from surprise, but from recognition. The stone responded. A pulse ran through it, soft at first, then stronger, like a deep drum beat echoing from inside the earth. A warm light seeped from the carvings, traveling like veins of fire. And then Laredo saw. Not with his eyes. With the bond, he saw Gray Fox as a child, running through the desert wind, laughter like sunlight. He saw her at 10, placing a hand on her mother's grave, alone with a grief too big for her small frame. He saw her training to track, to hunt, to survive. He saw her standing beneath the moon, choosing him the first time she watched him from afar. Gray Fox saw him too. She saw a boy on a ranch learning to mend fences with his father. She saw him bury his brother. She saw him ride into open plains because sometimes silence was kinder than memory. They were seeing each other's lives, not like stories told, but like living through them. When the visions faded, Gray Fox's eyes were wet, tears sliding silently down her face. "You carried so much alone," she whispered. "So did you," he answered, his voice rough. The bond no longer felt new. It felt right, but the stone had not finished. A final carving glowed, a warning etched deeper than all the others. To bind is to choose forever. To break is to lose the heart. The price revealed itself at last. This bond was not symbolic. If one of them ever left, truly left in spirit or in love, the other would feel the loss like a wound that never healed. A wound that could break the mind, break the soul. This was the eternal price. To stay was to love fully. To leave was to destroy them both. Laredo turned to Gray Fox. Their hands found each other without thought. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. They were one path now, one spirit, one destiny, for better, for worse, forever. When they returned to the village, dusk was settling across the land, painting the sky in deep blues and rose gold streaks. Smoke drifted from cooking fires, children laughed in the distance, and life moved as it always had. But to Laredo and Gray Fox, the world now felt different, subtly reshaped, as if the air itself hummed with something only they could feel. The bond was no longer a quiet presence. It was alive. Laredo could sense Gray Fox's footsteps before she took them, the rhythm of her pulse like a drumbeat echoing faintly in his own chest. And she felt the weight of his thoughts, the steadiness of his resolve, the flicker of doubt he tried to hide. Not as intrusions, as shared breath. The village noticed the change too. Some watched with quiet approval, some with awe, some with caution. The chief approached as they entered the circle of lodges. His gaze lingered on Laredo, not unkind but searching, measuring. This was a leader who had seen many bonds formed and many broken, and he understood more than he spoke. "You have done what many fear to do," the chief said. "You did not take her heart lightly." Laredo shook his head. "No, I didn't." Gray Fox stood just slightly closer to him than before, subtle, but meaningful. She didn't cling. She didn't lean. They simply belonged beside one another now. The chief nodded once. "Then the bond holds." But there was no celebration, no feast, no applause, just truth, and truth was heavy. They were given a small dwelling near the river, where the sound of running water softened the nights. When they entered, there were no furnishings beyond a woven mat and a small fire pit. Nothing to distract. Nothing to hide behind. Gray Fox lit a fire, her movements graceful and familiar. Laredo watched her for a moment, not with hunger, not with confusion, but with a quiet, aching understanding. He crossed the room and knelt beside her. "Tell me," he said softly, "what the future was that you gave up." Her hand stilled above the kindling. The shadows flickered across her cheekbones, her lashes, her lips. "I was meant to become the next keeper of the line of mothers," she said. "The one who teaches the young. The one who chooses the clan path." Laredo felt her sorrow before he heard it. "It was a future of purpose," she continued. "A future of honor. And you don't believe this is?" he asked. Gray Fox turned to him. Her eyes were deep, full of longing and vulnerability she never showed the world. "I believe this is something greater," she said. "But greater things always take something." Laredo reached out and took her hand. The bond warmed, like two hands finding each other in the dark. "I don't want to be your cage," he whispered. She shook her head immediately, fiercely. "You are not my cage. You are the sky. I chose the sky, even if it means I can never return to the earth I knew." They stayed like that, close enough to feel breath, but not touching beyond the hands, because the intimacy of the bond was deeper than any physical closeness. Eventually, Laredo spoke. "What's the price for me?" Gray Fox's silence said everything. Finally, she answered, "Your freedom." Not spoken harshly. Not spoken sadly. Simply truth. You can never walk this world alone again. If you leave me, by choice or by life, your spirit will wander. It will never rest. You will never stop feeling the part of me that is missing. Laredo let the words settle. He had always been a man who believed freedom meant being alone. The open plains, the silent horizons. But now, being alone meant losing her. Losing himself. He took a slow breath. Then I don't leave. Her eyes shone, not with surprise, but with relief so deep it trembled through the bond like a sigh. They lay beside each other that night, the fire crackling low, the river whispering outside. There were no promises spoken aloud. They didn't need them. Their souls had already promised. As sleep drifted over them, Laredo felt a whisper. Not a word, not a command, just being. Her spirit, his spirit, entwined, not as chains, as roots, as wings. The eternal price was not suffering. It was belonging. And for the first time in both their lives, they did not walk the world alone.